Good morning, everybody. Hello. Okay, so we are Project 12, and the themes that we want to share with you from our projects today are around transitions, technology, and teaching. We represent the 4 colleges, so there's myself and Lisa from Kirklees College, we've got Dan from Craven College, we've got 3 people from Gateshead. There we go, Gateshead people, and Elizabeth from Warwick. Oh, sorry, Alex. Yeah, so there's also you, right? So, as I said, we're doing kind of a holistic way of doing this. We're not doing one by one. So we're going to do the challenge of interspersing between us. So, fingers crossed the timings. I want to hand over to Elizabeth, who's going to start talking about the first theme, which is transitions. She's talking about the transition from school into FE.
Okay, so obviously a lot of these projects were in Canada. Right, so we, at the beginning of this year, we changed our curriculum timetabling, we changed to 3-hour sessions, and we changed our scheme of learning into a more holistic scheme of learning for GCSE resitors. And so we've used this project to frame what was going on. Because we've also introduced the GCSE pod, which our later colleagues will explain about that. So introducing the digital into the classrooms. We wanted to reimagine and rethink the GCSE curriculum to make it more accessible. But what the strand I'm going to talk to you about is the student researchers element of our project. What the Education Training Foundation have been able to do is to create a student as researchers group. So that we could create a consultation group, if you like, to ask them, who've all got the GCSE English already, and to ask them to go and talk to 3 groups of construction students who all have, across the board, about grade 1 or grade 2, so they're kind of low level in terms of the standard grade evaluating students, in terms of their English grades. And they're plumbing, motor vehicle, carpentry and joinery, and brickwork students, and engineering, but it's generally motor vehicle. So we got 3 groups of 24 students in total, and I will meet with the student researcher group who were identified from the student council, as well as from health and social care, and that's generally level 3 students. And I would meet with them on Wednesday lunchtimes. What we would do is the first thing we did at the beginning of the project survey with the 24 students. We asked them a whole range of questions about their experience at school and then their experience at college. Because what we were interested in is the transition from school to college. So what we all recognise as English teachers is that the students coming to FE resit classes come with a ton of baggage of negativity and upset and disruption from their school experience. And I found in the student research group, when I was talking with the student researchers, they themselves also, although they've already got grade 4, 5, 6, 7 in English, they talked to me about their secondary school experience. It was pretty harrowing. And so the student researchers used the survey as a diving off point to then construct a series of questions, which then went into the 24 students, different groups, and had focus groups and one-to-ones with our students to ask them about and find out about what their experience of English was at school and how that made them feel, and also how that translated the transition of moving into an FE college context, and then also how they felt about being, in the student researchers' words, forced into doing GCSE English. So these, I just wanted to get some of the student voices up here, and I've got to stop now, but here, so we asked attitudes to English. I'll take 1 minute off the next thing. Attitudes to English students bring with them to the FE resit class. It was really shocking. Some of them were put in isolation. Some of the students were segregated at school into different buildings. So when Ofsted came in, Ofsted wouldn't see them. I mean, loads and loads of stuff. And then an interesting shift into FE where they had a more positive experience. And all of you will know this because it's all your lived experience. But really, what I found really useful about this project is actually acting as a beacon to the outside world about what we all live with every day when we work in FE, with our students who come to us with all this kind of stuff. So the student researchers have uncovered what we know, but when you have students talking to students, a lot more is revealed than if we talk to the students. So anyway, I've got to shut up now because I'm one over time. Elizabeth?
So the theme from our project was actually the transition from FE into HE. So we were looking at students on level 3 and above courses within the college and how we can support their academic reading and writing skills. Firstly, to get through that level 3 qualification, and then for those, we have quite a high number of students that are progressing into HE, how we can support them in doing that. And we were getting feedback from local universities that there were growing issues around academic misconduct cases within HE because students are not understanding things around academic misconduct and plagiarism. So how to research well, developing their academic reading and their academic writing skills. So our project very much looked at this transition from FE into HE.
Okay, hi, I'm Dan from Craven College in Skipton, North Yorkshire. So I wanted to focus on in terms of the transition into employment, and centering that around spoken language development. So I'm really keen on students developing their presentation skills. So these were the key aims. I'll read them all to you. These were the aims of the project. Really just looking at the barriers that students face, both adult students and 16 to 18-year-olds on study programmes. Sure you all experience some similar, students that come to you as adult learners have real barriers to standing up for presenting for functional skills, level 1 now and level 2, and for GCSE as well. So to do that at Craven College, we used a group of 16 to 18 business studies students that were studying GCSE English and a group of adult learners that I taught in an evening class at level 2. Shall I carry on? How long was that?
Yeah, it's actually good.
All right. So for the adult learners, what was great was when we started in September, one of my students said to me in the first week, which was like perfect, it fit exactly with what I wanted to look at, that she had started a GCSE course and she'd left because she'd gone so far and done loads of work on it and then left as soon as the tutor mentioned you have to do a presentation. Other students over the course of the project said that they'd avoided, one student said she avoided coming to class in the second week of my class because of the thought of doing a presentation, but then stuck with it, and they were really glad that they'd done so. So other comments from students, this is kind of really feedback from the end of the project, so it doesn't explain how we got there, but with the adult learners, it didn't feel like I was doing anything really that innovative, other than just trying some different teaching methods to put speaking and listening at the centre and sort of support them to feel more confident with it. So some of the things that I did with a group of adult learners was to start with, rather than to introduce presentations like around Christmas time or whatever, at which point students in the past have gone, well, that's it, I'm leaving, I don't want to do it. We said in the first week, I had to set them the task of coming back in the second week with a 1-minute presentation, and all they had to do was bring in a book that was in some way relevant to them and to present it on a table, sat down with another group with the group, to just kind of break down the barrier of presentations in the first place. They then did a self-assessment, and they did that each time they did a presentation, so we built up to slightly longer ones and paired ones and a final presentation, and they measured their confidence as they went and talked about it with others. We looked at this is from the Oscar level 2 new functional skills material, so we looked at, that was Edwin, they all remembered Edwin who did a really poor presentation. It was a fail at level 2, but it was helpful for them to see his presentation, and Rose's was the one which passed, so they could look at what the criteria were and do what was expected of them. And then I also found, as a kind of incidental thing I hadn't really thought about, that adult students really struggled with PowerPoint, and they thought that was that they had to do, even though they don't have to do a PowerPoint, they all wanted to, but they lacked the technical skills to do it. So I gave them all a template, emailed it to them with some guidance on it, and gave them a little bit of help with using PowerPoint. The other group of students was business students, 16 to 18-year-old business students, and for them I had up a GCSE tutor and the business tutor, and the GCSE English tutor actually went along to the business sessions and helped them each week with their presentation skills in the business session rather than it being in the GCSE class, and that really helped to develop confidence for the tutors as well as for the students. So this is like a tracker, as you can see, over 4 weeks that the students kind of built up their skills. A tutor then gave individual feedback, came back the next week, they did a presentation again, just a really simple topic about themselves, but it was just to kind of, rather than throwing them in at the deep end, saying, oh yeah, next week you've got to do a presentation in front of your cohort, your group of students, for 5 minutes that they struggle with. There we go, that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, is that okay?
Yeah.
Right.
Hello, I'm Deborah from Gateshead College. So I just wanted to, obviously using digital technology to reach disengaged learners, we decided to change the pedagogy of our teaching by using podcasts to engage learners inside the classroom and outside. So we invested in a company called GCSE Pod. It's just one strand of the project. And just to give you a little bit of introduction to GCSE Pod, it is quite expensive. It is a private company, and GCSE Pod, they have little short bursts of 3 to 5 minute podcasts that learners can watch, and at the end of it they do some form of assessment, whether it be multiple choice, they can do free written style questions. The multiple choice questions are marked instantly, so students get instant feedback. In the free written responses, lecturers can go into the system and mark and give them feedback by logging in. But it does encourage students to take a bit of ownership of their learning. So GCSE Pod does work quite closely to awarding bodies. We use AQA, and the GCSE Pods are linked to the assessment criteria that are mapped. And what teachers can go in is actually pre-select the pods that you want your learners to use and to go into with a view to then either do homework, or they can come in and do it with a little bit more knowledge coming into the classroom, which Richard will give you a little bit more information on. But as a centre, you can run and download reports, you get student data, find out how often they're logged on, how many podcasts they're streamed, when they do it, to give you can also do like online workbooks, so you can either set your own assignments or use pre-selected ones. And you can also, in order to identify and develop students' individual skills in terms of their development areas, you can assign personalised playlists for your students to watch. So in terms of, we got some, so in addition to Gateshead College doing GCSE Pod, Warrington, yeah that's right, Warrington Vale Royal College also invested in GCSE Pod, and the learner feedback was quite mixed. But this is some of the learner feedback, so I'll not go through all of them, but some of them said it was a little bit boring, just where some students really thought it was helping them out, identify the skill areas that they need to work on. In particularly videos help to understand specific subjects of GCSE because the pods are mapped to the GCSE assessment criteria. Somebody said that it puts stuff in context, but there were some negative points, it didn't work for everybody. So Gateshead College, one of my students had put, they quite like the idea of having a digital platform to use at home that can access anywhere from tablet, from their mobile phone, but they just, in terms of the podcast, in terms of quality, hadn't experience in terms of developing their skills as much as what they thought it would. But they did say that it gives an idea of what a lesson's going to be about if you pre-select the pods that you want your students to watch. And one of the other things, they thought that it was quite a little bit basic. So in terms of good for an introduction, but didn't go really beyond that to develop higher order thinking skills. So that was just some of the learner feedback, and why some students really found it beneficial and helped them to identify key areas of their development and take a bit ownership, responsibility, accountability for their own learning.
So in terms of our case studies, we'll have 4 different case studies that use the GCSE pods in very different ways. So one of our examples use it as flipped learning, so it's homework set in advance to come and prepare for the class. Again, for some students, as an initial introduction, it was great to say this is the question that you're going to be dealing with, you know the basic steps that you're going to follow. Second one, we used as an introduction to the lesson, so some staff used it within the lesson rather than using it as a homework tool, again, just to introduce it. We ideally when we first came up with the idea of sort of doing this project, because of the limited time space that we had to do it, we thought we've got a group of students doing the November resit. They would be ideal candidates to have a look to see how beneficial these videos are. So one of our case studies is looking at that one. And other two that we have members of staff that have had a go at making their own pods. So I said there was a lot of criticism on the context side of the pods, that they weren't necessarily in-depth enough. So some staff members made their own and students have done a comparison, or myself within my classes actually got my students to make their own pods, which they are using and sharing as revision tools with other people. So you use that using Screencastify, so if anyone wants to know anything about that, please remember to listen.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Lisa. I'm one of the subject librarians from Kirklees College, and I've been part of the project team working with Kathy, looking at reviewing the study skills. This is the only slide we have in this section, very simple and clear, as you can tell. Kathy's probably going to give me about 30 seconds now, but just to put it into some sort of context, our previous offering, what this has replaced, was created by a number of different librarians within the college, so it had a very different feel. It was aimed at all students, not very much to differentiate. And so as part of this project, the funding enabled us really to look at this afresh. It wasn't achieving what we needed it to achieve, it wasn't being used very much. It was the assumption that everybody was going to progress through to the different levels, how it was structured, and also parts of it didn't actually work. The software was no longer supported by the college. So we tried to sort of have a look, be honest with ourselves and just say how bad it were in parts, and after we mopped his brow and thought how much time we spent on creating it all, we then decided what are we actually going to do. We want it to look different, to feel different. So we focused on, like Kathy said, the level 3, that transition from FE to HE. I go to some events where with other libraries, where we sit with colleges and universities, and the sort of one of the aspects were sort of students moving up from HE into HE, from FE, that the skill set wasn't always there. They've been taught from a textbook and not really, on some courses, come outside of that textbook. So plagiarism, referencing, critical writing, reading skills, they weren't necessarily developed to the level that they needed to be, which hopefully this will somehow go to support improving. So this is a very uniform approach, it's very click-driven. We did have a nice introduction to it that I thought was wonderful, but some students fed back that actually they didn't like that. So they have influenced that. It no longer, as you can see, has a huge introduction at the start. It's all click button, it's all menu-driven. I try and view it and speak to curriculum area managers when we go out and sort of push it with them. It's that it's a pick and mix approach. Students would choose what they wanted to use at that moment in time and can come back and return to that. And that seems to be really good, and we do use student feedback. We had a feedback form at all the sessions. They gave us that feedback electronically, and so we've worked on that. We've put this Getting HE Ready section in, which is quite new for us. So it's based on content that we've created, but also that we purchased through the blended learning consortium. I'm now going to leave that there.
Seamless, right? It's like so I hope you can kind of see how the themes of our 4 very different projects have come together, this transitions, and then the technologies from the GCSE pod that's been a bought thing to the VLE page that we, when I say we, the LRC staff have made. And this is one of the key findings that we found at Kirklees College, is that there needs to be this collaboration between the tutors and the LRC staff and the students. So we have this resource, this VLE page, that previously existed but wasn't really being used. So we created something new and we're promoting it. But along with that, we needed to gather some evaluation from the key kind of stakeholders. So again, using that actively to change and update the resource So like these three notions of action, promotion and evaluation are ongoing all the time. So for example, the promotion, we found some of the formal channels of communication weren't really working at all. Tutors and students weren't really aware that this resource existed, so more informal channels, informal conversations managed to get word of mouth out there in terms of us being able to promote it and get feedback from it. And there were also some issues around miscommunication that we found out from various sources, that people were thinking because there was an online resource there, that meant they weren't able to go and access the LRC staff for face-to-face support. They thought it kind of excluded, whereas we definitely wanted it obviously to be a supplementary thing. Pick and mix, that's our new thing. A choice, not a limiting factor. So in terms of the things we've learned, definitely what I've learned as a researcher, having multiple roles in the project has been really important to me. I am a teacher, I teach initial teacher education. Being a researcher on the project, I'm also an advanced practitioner, so I had that role as well. I'm a project lead. So I've definitely learned a lot and upskilled myself in terms of understanding my different roles and how they impact on what we found out about the project and how we can move forward. This is just the end of the beginning. We have nowhere near done. Thank you. Next.
Cool, right. Okay. So learners have got a digital platform in which they can use at any time. And that was one thing that was quite sort of useful for a lot of our learners. As Louise mentioned before, one of our sort of strands of using this was for the November resit. And quite a lot of the revision classes that we put on, learners quite like to come along and just kind of like hide away, you know, do their own kind of learning that way. And then as the weeks went on, it was really interesting because if learners had been at college all day and then come in the evening, they expected a traditional face-to-face talk class. And that was quite interesting for us. The lad in the picture there is a learner that I taught about 4 years ago, who started with us at entry 3 level. And he'd taken it about 4 times, and in the November he actually passed. And we videoed it. The thing is, he's such a charismatic lad, but he'd been dumped by his girlfriend the day before. So on the video, you've got this sense of this lad being slightly dejected. So if you watch the video, just bear that in mind, because he's such a great lad, and for him, something like the GCSE pod was yet another thing to kind of help him. A couple of other learners, again, well, we're in the North East, obviously my accent's not from the North East, but a lot of our learners found the RP a little bit kind of distant and unfamiliar, so that was quite an interesting one. And obviously with Louise and Martin on our team, with quite different accents, it was familiar because we're used to that voice in class.
So having kind of the staff-owned made GCSE classes, those ones are quite basic, the staff-owned ones went into more detail, it was contextualised for students, and staff used vocabulary that the students were familiar with, so for them, they engaged a lot more with the staff-made ones necessarily than with GCSE pod. Though there isn't the assessment questions afterwards, they still felt as though it was a really good revision tool to use. In terms of students creating their own podcasts, it was quite varied feedback. I had some vocational areas that really enjoyed it, like music and performing arts, and some healthcare and earlier students really enjoyed it, because it was a different way of thinking about how to answer the questions. It was building their confidence to go, I'm really good at doing this question, I'm sure that the people have to do it. But then other students, like art design and media, said they didn't enjoy making their own podcasts because they've had to do it previously, or it wasn't polished enough, or they didn't like the sound of their own voices. But it was quite a nice, effective tool. It is a good way of getting students to think about something from a different perspective. I am going to make them do it again in about 3 weeks' time. They don't know this yet. They're going to do it for paper 2, so we'll see if the feedback changes the second time round. I've changed, so said they had to record their own voice for the first time round. A lot of them didn't like that, so I'm going to give them the option of nominating somebody else to record a voice or to use text-to-speech as an alternative as well. So I'm going to do it again, continue on the research to see if that impacts whether or not they enjoy doing it and whether or not they actually use it as a revision tool.
I think it's worth noticing, because I think we all agree that in terms of Warwick Vale having a chat this morning, that I think the GCSE pod works really good for you quite low level learners. But I think for your more able learners, I think the GCSE pod hits a limit, so it doesn't really develop those higher order thinking skills, because with English it's that layered interpretation, which necessarily it's about GCSE pod's good for identifying delivery techniques, but then as part of the analysis you've got to demonstrate what image, rights, intentions, look at the tone, and that's what the GCSE pod lacks a little bit in terms of taking your students beyond that sort of surface level learning. But
Yeah, certainly we've just done an end of survey, an end of project survey with our construction students, and it's overwhelmingly positive about the GCSE pod. So that's it, because they're all, low level, in quotes, low level. Which thing do I press? Is it editing?
Can I just ask, the GCSE pod, is that for one particular board?
No,
it's
all exams.
So how does, because obviously AQA questions are quite different.
So they base it on assessment objectives, so they know that vast majority of papers have to do language analysis, so they do bog standard videos on these are what language techniques are, this is how you pick them out in a text. So that's whilst they do that in terms of the assessment objectives, they're not necessarily contextualised, so this is where you start developing
question specific.
But they have looked at different exam boards and mapped videos based to the assessment objectives.
Okay, so with the project that we did, I just wanted to say before, we did collaborate with a lot of people. So you had the English teachers, 3 English teachers. We worked with the enrichment coordinator who helped us with get the students to be the researchers. And there was myself, we liaised with the construction team, and also pastoral. So it was a kind of a holistic project with people. But anyway, so what we've discovered is, and what we knew, found out was that the students' research is an important vehicle for a more authentic response in terms of what's going on in the college, but also in terms of the collaborative student community, because you have, level 3 students working with level 2, so to speak. And what we've highlighted in the project is that the transition to college, the research students bring a core school experience into the FE classroom, which we are expected to and try our hardest to turn around. And we know this, but it's important to repeatedly push this message out to the government and everywhere. And that's why I think the Educational Training Foundation, in enabling us to do this, are providing us with a platform to shout this out more clearly with the authentic voices of the students, speaking about their experience at school and how that makes them feel when they come to FE. And also their own responses to the GCSE English curriculum. It's not fit for purpose for them. One of the students called it old-fashioned. It's too pressurised, that they find the exams just very difficult. All the stuff that we all know, but actually to have it sort of authenticated by the student voices themselves through talking to other students, I think makes it even more powerful. And so hopefully we can use this platform to push this to Michael Gove et al.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay, so from the project in Craven College, there were lots of findings. I've said one and I've written 2, but there were more than that. But these were the main ones I think that I chose, which were that for adult students, like I said earlier, just starting off with presentations right from the word go helped, and in particular I've noticed that students and the students themselves, that it helped them to gel as a group, so they were sharing things about themselves, personal stories, having brought in a book and presented on that, and then doing their own presentations about a topic that interested them. So they kind of all felt like they'd invested in the course, they gelled together, they watched each other's presentations, and that in turn helped them with committing to the course and then sitting their exams, sitting their reading and writing exams. And it improved retention. The year before, there was a definite drop-off with GCSE adult students and the level 2 adult students when they'd done fine with the reading and writing. To them, that was the easier bit. We as teachers often think that's the harder bit and get that out of the way first. But they were fine with the reading and writing exams. But then a few of them left when they found out they had to do a presentation this year. That all those that started in September are still there now. So I think that's a good solid outcome. In terms of the other group, which was a vocational group of business students, like many of us, I'm always looking at ways to help vocational tutors and English tutors to link together. It really helped them to work together, and an outcome which we didn't really expect so much was that the business students did their presentations in the business session, but they presented on having read a book, they did a book review. So they were also improving their reading skills, and they were much more enthusiastic about reading and reading aloud and sharing and reading outside of their English classes. And so bringing that into the business session, it just kind of helped everything just to show it together, and everyone feeling more confident. There we go.
That's it. There's one last slide.
Right.
That's it. Any questions?
Yeah, kind of back to the kind of the themes that we were looking at. We've all kind of come out with this notion that there is no one size fits all. Have to take this pick and mix. This has definitely come from ours. This notion that it's providing pathways, different choices, different options for students. So like the GCSE pod is useful for one group, maybe not for a different group. And also for all of us, it is just the beginning. We have not. It's just scraping the surface. Plenty more work to be done. So, thank you very much.
Any questions? Time for questions, yeah.
With your BLE, sorry, your study skills.
Say that again?
With the study skills, do you find that students have used that? What's been students' reaction to it?
So it's
really positive.
It has generally been quite positive, yeah. That's what I'm saying, that whole notion of what the VLE page previously looked like was kind of like a course. It had been written in the way that you started here and then you worked through it, and there was like a course at a lower level, and then like this notion that, but it really wasn't used, sort of taking this idea that you can kind of go in, there's a theme and then there's various links within that. That means that people have been using it very, very differently, whether it's been in class or out of class.
Can I ask the student focus group, did you do that in lesson?
Research.
Student research group, was that in lesson time, or did you have to bribe them to do it another time?
The student researchers was a group.
Yeah.
I would meet them at lunchtime and bribe them with the money from the UTM to provide them with lunch. So we'd have pizzas and that obviously. So every Wednesday we have lunch. Every Wednesday. Just from January though, it's just from January. No, actually I think we had the first meeting in December, I can't remember. But anyway. And then our researchers went to the 3 English groups that had been identified who were doing the GCSE pod, who'd been doing it since term 1. And then they would go in and liaise with the English teachers, and the student researchers would go in and just take over sort of half an hour of a lesson.
And they'd already passed their GCSE?
They were all level 3 students. They were, some of them were health and social, but some of them were the student council. We sort of tapped the student council initially because that was a good vehicle. And then I worked with the enrichment coordinator because she knew something already. So that was good. And the Wednesday meetings created a really good thing. We used WhatsApp, we had a WhatsApp thingy, we had a Google, I'm useless.
All the lads in the classes knew that it was going to happen, so they all got told that they were in the project. They all got told that there was an incentive as well, which was got like Amazon vouchers for them. And each month, whoever was top of the leaderboard would get a certain amount, and the second would get a certain amount. So we did it across 3 individual groups throughout the week. So we had a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and all the lads that were involved in those classes knew that it was coming up, that there was going to be students coming in asking them questions, and we told them it'd be the week before it actually was. So that they expected it that week and it didn't happen, so we gave them a little bit more prep to say, oh, they're going to come in next week and talk to you and ask you these questions. And then it was kind of the student action research group went into the room, we all left, and it was just those guys in the room. They recorded everything themselves, so there was no like pressure. We weren't watching them, we went away.
Did you have, would we be able to see the questions? Have you got those
sure,
available?
it's all, it'll, as part of the summary thing in the appendix.
Yeah.
I won't use your The appendix is at the end has the questions and
They just do it themselves. They do it themselves. They just get it as a form, put it on the Google Classroom, and they link through on that. So they're not like nobody knows what they're saying. They're answering themselves.
You know,
the student research group, you mean, when they're asking questions to the student, they're all asked the same questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd just be good to see
Yeah,
what.
sure.
Yeah. Be
And they are the
fantastic.
questions that the students themselves devised. So that's the other thing. And then the other thing which I said before, the answers that the students themselves give, the construction lads, some of them, they're just exactly as you predict, is quite monosyllabic, quite, quite a few of them disengaged. So they kind of fulfil, sadly, what you'd expect, but some of them become quite, get quite worked up about some of the responses. So the way they answer, it just says such a lot as well, and it kind of matches what we know, what they say in the survey about their school experience and how they hate English and how they're useless and they're failures and it's all kind of grammar and swear words and they're talking with other students as well, So it is really, really interesting, very, very interesting indeed. Very powerful work, I think, that would be good to get more people to do.
Can I just say about the evidence that's being produced? Is going to be in the case studies that accompany the reports, and they're gold dust to other teachers, to ourselves. To some extent, the report is polite generally and insightful, but it's when you're actually able to engage with the students' work, the teachers' resources. You say, well, don't like that, I'll have that. That's really good. And a really good thing that I've seen happen before that's worked well is if you look at other students' responses from a project, if you're thinking of trying something, it can be quite interesting anonymising where you got the responses from, but giving it to your own students and say, this is what some other students thought about whatever, whether it's the use of technology or GCSE pod, because that really does make them central. And quite often the comments from other people legitimise them to make criticisms that they might feel are otherwise impolite or discourteous, or they're going to get into trouble for. So don't just look at the reports when they come out. Just click on because they'll all be on the web page. Chase them up and do steal and exploit them. Somebody's worked hard to produce them for you, so please.
But I have to say, having some money from the ETF to do the lunch, and also students got themselves each a nice notebook which they really liked, and it did make it does these things we know as teachers, they make a massive difference because there's nothing in FE, let's face it, and some colleges people miss it, and whoever wants that. But so to have that resource was absolutely, they made them feel really great as well, over.
Something they could put on their CV as well, isn't it?
Oh, completely.
So good.
But for the student research, it goes on UCAS, everything. It's like, and they're going to disseminate it to the student council and to the principal, that findings of the college, of the project, and hopefully it will feed in. It's definitely going to feed into decision making about our 3-hour timetable slot next year, and also about the GCSE pod, which was an overwhelmingly positive response actually, which has surprised me in fact. But identifying, because they were the lower level students, the GCSE pod being more basic, that probably makes sense and matches.
I was going to say we found a similar thing, haven't we? Not particularly in maths, it was in it, but we were looking at maths, but we found a similar thing. We've aimed it at functional skills straight GCSE.
Right. Yeah.
Is that the GCSE pod?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you find that students would use it better for English or maths?
Maths is the one that we're focusing
Maths
most
is our
on.
focus. We've had a soft rollout with English, but a lot of engagement with maths. And as you guys mentioned, the reporting, it's so detailed. You can have a general overview, can't you? Or you can really drill down. We've got a lot of benefit out of that.
I think for us it was even getting students to log on and actually taking the time 5 minutes out, and whether they might not have skills progressed, it's trying to sort of maybe a difference in change in mindset.
It was the buy-in factor, that the initial buy-in, and then everything else comes afterwards, really.
It's given them something they can do.
Okay. Thank you so much.